for this one is street food as a lens to cultural connectivity. And it is my pleasure to introduce you to the moderator for this session, Avantika Bhuyan, National Features Editor of Mint Lounge. Avantika Bhuyan is a National Features Editor at the Mint Lounge with nearly 18 years of experience. She has been writing about the impact of technology on child development and the intersections of art, culture with gender, history, and sexuality. Welcome, Avantika. And the speakers today, my pleasure to call Ms. Priyadarshini Chatterjee on stage. Priyadarshini is an author and food, culture, and travel writer. Her work has appeared in several national and international publications, including Condé Nast Traveller India, Whetstone Magazine, Mint Lounge, Scroll, The Hindu Business Line, The Lonely Planet India, and others. She was awarded the Kalpalata Fellow for Food Writings in 2022. And she has dabbled in different genres of food writing and now works at the intersection of food, history, and culture. Recently, her story, The Purple Heart of the Banana Tree, made the shortlist, top 10, for the Condé Nast India Excellence in Food Writing Awards. We are all celebrating her new book, The First Bite, Breakfast Stories from Urban India. Now I call upon Mr. Devender Kumar Singh, entrepreneur and owner, Mr. Littiwal. Welcome, sir. Mr. Singh is an entrepreneur and founder-owner of the brand Mr. Littiwal. He founded the brand in 2010 and now has multiple outlets across Delhi. A graduate from IHM, he has worked in large commercial kitchens and finally decided to start his own brand to popularize street food from Bihar. Welcome, Mr. Singh. Joining us virtually is Mr. Chu Hao Pei, who is a visual artist and researcher based in Singapore. He is interested in the region of Southeast Asia with a focus on Chinese archival sources, natural history, and the socio-political impacts from contemporary translation of historical events. Welcome, Mr. Chu Hao Pei. I now hand it over to Avantika for the discussion.
Thank you so much. Welcome back, everyone, to what we hope will be another insightful discussion. Street food means different things to different people. For a lot of us, it is memory. It offers a sense of community. And it's something you bond over with family and friends. But for a lot of people, it is a source of daily sustenance. It is a means of livelihood, empowerment, and a means of reclaiming public spaces. Today, all the panelists have come together to look at street food and cultural connectivity. And we'll examine, sure. We will examine dishes from India and beyond through the lens of politics, gender, labor, and migration. So if you look at street food through the lens of labor, Priyadarshini, you've talked about the ways of reading the city through its street food in your book, The First Bite. And you've talked about how public food places are predominantly male, be it through the consumer or the vendors. And yet the labor that goes into making of this food is female. You've written about, a breakfast vendor in the Mumbai dockyards. The food is prepared by his wife, who gets up at 3 a.m. daily. So how do you read street food through that lens?
Thank you, Avantika, for the question. So let me clarify one thing. I looked at street food as breakfast, and there is a distinct difference between street food in the evenings, say, which we kind of think of in terms of, pleasure, entertainment. You go out with your family, you go out with friends, have some puchka or golgappa. And but in the mornings, the consumption of street food is different. It is extremely functional. There's a sense of urgency. This is mostly, fuel for large bodies of working class people who sort of, who again in turn fuel a city and sort of gear a city into action. So there is a distinct difference there. Now, when we talk about working class food, of course, women are also a part of that working class, right? So if I'm looking at even construction workers, yes, there are maybe more male construction workers, but women are also working at construction sites. But I have been to vendors that predominantly serve, say, construction workers in a particular area, but I haven't seen women eat there. So there is sort of a lack of visibility there. In general, I think, there is less visibility of women in public spaces. Yes, it's increased, but that difference is still there. But especially for breakfast. And I also saw a difference between, like you said, labor and livelihood come here, because there were quite a few instances where the food was being prepared by women at home. The men brought it and they sold it, and the consumption was also mostly done by men. I saw this, as you mentioned, in Bombay, in the dockyards at Bhaucha Dhakka. There is a gentleman who comes and, he sells this massive array of food, in the mornings. But that food is prepared by his wife, who wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning, prepares the food, and he brings it and he sells it. And his neighbors, the other vendors there, tells me he can't even do this right. Wait till his wife comes, he'll take over. So, there's a joke, and he's a very nice, very sweet man, but there's a joke around there. I also saw this to an extent, say, in Gujarat. And it's in Ahmedabad, I realized that a lot of the food that they consume as breakfast is snacks, right? A lot of the nashto and, farsan that they have as breakfast, because my, inquiry, the field of inquiry was breakfast. So these are prepared by women-led organizations. There are so many, women involved in cottage industry style, production units that are many a times all women. They are the ones who are preparing it. But again, even in Ahmedabad, in public breakfast eateries or streets, I haven't seen the presence of women as much.
No, that's an interesting point also. But are there exceptions to this?
Yes.
Yeah, and where?
I'm sorry. So I was going to come to it, but
Sure.
That is why what struck me the most was when I went to Shillong. Shillong is one place where women make, sell, and eat breakfast on the streets in the public space. Also, it makes me wonder that this absence of women in public breakfast eateries in the morning, what all could it signify? Is it that because more women are at home during that time? Is it because breakfast is so, street food is so intimately tied to migration? In fact, one of the earliest questions that came to me when I was sort of thinking of breakfast was I get my breakfast at home. That's the first meal early in the morning. Who goes out to eat? But there is so much food served on the street. So who is eating it? Essentially, it's people without a home and hearth here. And traditionally, it's the women who have cooked. So the absence of women are also pushing a lot of, are what, traditionally made men go out and seek food on the streets. So there are various ways in which sort of women are present even by being absent. Shillong, like I said, that was an exception, but also the Khasi society it's a matrilineal society. There's a lot more presence of women in public spaces, although it's complex, it's not so simple, because even there, I've been told so many times that yes, here women go out to work, but domestic responsibilities, which you might think in that case would be better distributed, is also the woman's responsibility.
While we're looking at gender and labor, food is also, has always been a tool of diplomacy since time immemorial. Whether it is to strengthen relationships with allies or to diffuse tensions with the opposition. And one example that really stands out in this, is of the former president of Indonesia, Megawati, who used the popular dish of nasi goreng to de-escalate tension with her political rival. Mr. Chu Haupei, who joins us from Singapore today, has made this particular political act a basis for his artistic and scholarly practice. If you could talk about that, about how this particular moment in history and this particular dish became an exploration for you.
Thank you for the introduction. I'd like to do a quick sharing and I think yeah, thank you for that question, and also I'd like to give a little bit of context of what exactly is my project. And so as you can see here on the, hold on, just give me a while. Yeah, so this is actually the article that was being shared about how Megawati was basically using fried rice to do diplomacy, and this diplomacy is basically domestic political diplomacy in Indonesia. So she was basically cooking fried rice for current Indonesian President Prabowo in this case, as a way of de-escalating tensions, because both of them belong to different factions of the political scene in Indonesia, and this was also seen as a very uh, interesting scene in the Indonesian political landscape. And I guess for me, this is quite an inspiration, because it really shows me what kind of diplomacy food can actually play into. But this actually inspired me to look into something that is slightly different from what they're doing, because what they're doing is high politics. That means politicians to politicians level kind of politics. But for me, I wanted to look into something that is a little bit more at the ground level, at the what the international relations would call citizens diplomacy. So very quickly run through perhaps these two projects that I've really looked at and how they actually connect to what's my larger space is I wanted to go back to a time back in mid 2023 to mid 2024 when India actually banned non-basmati rice export to the rest of the world. And this is quite a big issue because India is the world's largest rice exporter to the world. So there was basically a rice crisis because of that. And why am I sharing this is because I want to talk about this particular installation, which I did in back in 2023 in Goa, India, where I was invited to the Serendipity Arts Festival 2023 in Goa. And I presented this particular work based on the earlier context of India's rice export ban. So you might be asking or wondering why is this so? So what is this? So this is actually what I did is basically create this rice installation. But what is interesting is that all these rice varieties are brought in from Southeast Asia and China into Goa, India, where I basically made a kind of barter exchange situation because of that rice export ban in India. So for that, I actually it's an interactive installation where I actually kind of have all these different logos or other small price packets where I kind of design them according to different politicians and leaders in the respective countries of the rice that I brought in, and also giving a short story, as you can see at the bottom here, and also the kind of talking about the different stories of each politicians have with either rice or fried rice itself. And then also lastly, a small QR code which direct people to the recipe of the respective fried rice recipe of the country. So what really happens is that I kind of planted a local non-basmati rice from India because I wanted to create a situation where I, as a foreigner coming to India, and on the context of the rice export ban in India, I wanted to sort of get whole or get a little bit of the Indian non-basmati rice. So I planted that and also making it a kind of a pay as you wish contribution. But I do kind of put like a minimum rupee kind of contribution for a cup of rice, because what I'm doing is that I'm inviting the people, the visitors, to actually take the rice, the local non-basmati Indian rice, and then basically trade it over to this site where and in barter exchange for the different rice, different foreign rice varieties which I brought in here. So in this way, I'm also creating a kind of a citizen-led or empowering the visitors as a way of exercising their diplomacy. And what I've done is that I brought in all this foreign rice to create this situation of a diplomacy. So this is pretty much what I was trying to do at furthering diplomacy at a very citizen level. And then very quickly also moving on, and later on, right after this exhibition, I came back to Singapore. I was very lucky to be invited by a local theatre group where they have an initiative working with food. They are called Practice Tuck Shop. And so what I did is that I basically invited several friends and collaborators who are of Southeast Asian communities based in Singapore. And I invite them to actually cook their own respective nasi goreng recipes or fried rice recipes to kind of share with the local audience, where basically most of the other participants that are participating are from. And so this became a way of, you can say, cultural diplomacy, or rather, more specifically, gastro diplomacy, because we are sharing different recipes, or in this case, nasi goreng recipes, with the different audiences. And through that, we learn of their cultural, or more, learn of their gastro culture. And at the same time, we also further the conversations into a lot more others as well. So on the left here, this is the first version, which I did with a Cambodian friend, or rather my friend who's half Cambodian and half Singaporean. Her father is Cambodian. So this gentleman here, he is the Cambodian, and he basically tried to serve us a specific type of Cambodian fried rice itself. And on the right here is actually, I worked with my friends from Philippines. They actually serve us the garlic fried rice. So where you actually, it's just a very simple dish where you just fry the rice with garlic, but you actually eat it with this pan fry kind of small fish, and then also with bananas as well, and even coffee, as you can see here. So I think there are a lot of different exchanges and differences of eating cultures, eating habits, and even recipes that make us quite open our insights towards different food culture, and also kind of this and another two version. The one on the left is a version I did with some of the Malaysians, or other ex-Malaysians as well in Singapore, as well as on the right here is with the Burmese community in Singapore. So again, I kind of showed, again, asking them to cook one of their recipes, to share with a largely Singaporean audience in that case. And then from there, the conversations, of course, usually do not just stay within, I would say, do not stay within just food, but also go into culture, and perhaps also creating a platform and a situation to understanding the country better and then through food in that way. Because certain countries, in this case of the communities that I work with, are not as familiar among Singaporeans as much as I would like them to. So this becomes also a space and a place for them to kind of have this kind of exchanges and learn of each other's, first of all, food, and then eventually kind of like culture as well. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's kind of that the first question is kind of how it really informed my whole artistic practice and also scholarly practice as well, where I've also written about these two particular projects actually.
Sure, thank you. That was very insightful, and I'll come back to you with another question maybe later on in the discussion. But I wanted to look at the street foodscape, be it in India or otherwise, is full of very interesting stories, of people, not just about the food. And उनमें से एक कहानी है देवेंद्र जी की ऑफ मिस्टर लिट्टीवाला, जिन्होंने ऑथेंटिक बिहारी डिश जो बिहार में हर गली कूचे में पाई जाती है, लेकिन आपने उसको दिल्ली में पॉपुलराइज करने का एक जो जज्बा दिखाया, अपनी जर्नी के बारे में अगर आप बताएं, क्योंकि आप फॉर्मली ट्रेंड हैं IHM से, एंड आपने नामी गिनामी रेस्टोरेंट्स होटल्स के साथ काम किया है, तो ये क्या एक घर के खाने की याद से शुरू हुआ, या आपको पोटेंशियल लगा कि रीजनल खाने को एक वाइडर पब्लिक तक ले जाना चाहिए?
मैं IHM 98 का पास आउट हूँ। ISM रांची से पास आउट किया था। 12 साल इंडस्ट्री में जॉब किया, ताज में, अशोका में, ग्रैंड हयात में। मैं कॉमी से शुरू किया था और शेफ, एग्जीक्यूटिव शेफ तक मैं गया। लास्ट छोड़ दिया नौकरी 2010 में। कहीं ना कहीं मेरे जहन में था कि लिट्टी चोखा बिहार का एक ऐसा प्रोडक्ट है जो हेल्दी है और बहुत हेल्दी है। फास्ट फूड तो बहुत सारा दिल्ली में मिलता है, बट लिट्टी चोखा इतना गुणवत्ता से भरा पड़ा हुआ है, फिर भी दिल्ली में अच्छे लेवल पे नहीं मिल रहा है। उस समय नोएडा में मिलता था, दिल्ली में कहीं नहीं मिलता था। 2010 में हमने अपने फैमिली और दोस्तों और बैचमेट के विरुद्ध जा कर के एक ब्रांड मिस्टर लिट्टीवाला का स्थापित किया। उस समय कोई भी मेरा सपोर्ट नहीं किया, क्योंकि हम लोग का स्टैंडर्ड नहीं था कि हम एक एग्जीक्यूटिव मैंने इस लेवल पे सेफ होकर के, होटल मैनेजमेंट करके, लाख रुपए की तनख्वाह की नौकरी छोड़ करके लिट्टी चोखा एक छोटे स्तर पे स्ट्रीट फूड में जाकर बेचना मेरे लिए बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज था। और फैमिली नहीं सपोर्ट, मम्मी पापा नहीं सपोर्ट, सब लोगों ने कहा कि क्या लिट्टी बेचोगे अब दिल्ली शहर में। फिर भी हमने शुरू किया 2010 में, और आज हमारे कंपनी का टर्नओवर है 2,65,00,000 का GST के साथ। 4 आउटलेट चला रहा हूँ, सर को पता है। प्राइम लोकेशन इंडिया गेट पे एक सेंट्रल विस्ता की जगह बिहार सरकार ने दिया। दिल्ली हाट INA ने बिहार सरकार का जो दुकान है वो हमें दिया गया। आज दिल्ली हाट INA में मैं बैठा हूँ, दिल्ली हाट में इंडिया गेट पे बैठा हूँ। भीतरी स्मॉल में एक फूड कोर्ट KFC के बराबर में एक अपना ब्रांड बैठा हुआ है लिट्टी चोखा के लिए। तो ये हमारे लिए बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज था। शुरू किया, 15 सालों में मैंने बहुत ऊपर नीचे देखा और बहुत सारी समस्याएं हैं, समाधान हुआ। और अभी भी हमने कम से कम 40 स्टाफ रखा दुकान पे। 40 आदमी आए, ट्रेनिंग लिया, काम किया। और लिट्टी चोखा की दुकान करने में बहुत पूंजी की जरूरत नहीं पड़ती है, तो गरीब लोगों ने हमारे यहाँ ट्रेनिंग लिया और अपना वो स्वतः 1 साल 6 महीना 2 साल के बाद बोले कि भैया मैं अपना काम करूँगा। वो अभी दिल्ली के कई नुक्कड़ पे कहीं जाएंगे तो अपना वो लिट्टी चोखा बेच रहे हैं, अपना रोजगार चला रहे हैं। तो उनका एक तो 40 आदमी का रोजगार मिल गया। 20-22 आदमी हमारे यहाँ काम कर रहे हैं, उनका भी रोजगार मिल रहा है। वो भी 1-2 साल काम करेंगे, वो अपनी जाकर कहीं माने एम्प्लॉयमेंट भी हम जनरेट कर रहे हैं। और लिट्टी चोखा ही नहीं है, लिट्टी चोखा के साथ भी कई से ऐसे प्रोडक्ट होते हैं, रीजनल फूड है बिहार का, वो भी बहुत गुण से भरा पड़ा हुआ है। तो वो लोग उसको भी हम लोग दिल्ली हाट INA में, इंडिया गेट पे, भीतरी मॉल में 30-35 प्रोडक्ट बना करके हम लोग बेच रहे हैं। और मैं यह मजबूरी नहीं थी हमारी, यह हमारे जहन में था कि भाई लिट्टी चोखा बिहार का इतना अच्छा प्रोडक्ट और दिल्ली में नहीं है। जबकि दिल्ली में, पूरे दिल्ली में देखिए कि बहुत सारे लोग बिहार के भरे पड़े हुए हैं, नीचे लेवल से लेकर ऊपर लेवल तक। और आज मैं बहुत सौभाग्यशाली समझता हूँ और बहुत अच्छा स्थिति है मेरा कि यह शब्द बात कहने के लिए आप लोगों के बीच में मौका मिलता है, और फ़ख्र की बात है। और हेल्दी फूड है, इसे सबको खाना भी चाहिए। स्वस्थ रहना है तो स्ट्रीट फूड में थोड़ा सा सुधार करूंगा मैम आपको। ब्रेकफास्ट में जो मेनू है ना, ब्रेकफास्ट की मेनू ढोकला हो रहा है गुजरात का, रीजनल फूड जहाँ जहाँ आप जिस देश में जाएंगे वहाँ आपको मिलेगा, और वो हेल्दी और स्वच्छ और बहुत बढ़िया होता है। खाना भी चाहिए आदमी को। जो अभी हम लोग जंक फूड की तरफ जा रहे हैं देश में, अब देख रहे होंगे दिल्ली NCR में भी, चाहे हर देश में भी अब चाइनीज जैसे मोमोज आ गया है, चिली पोटैटो आ गया है। चाइनीज फूड से परहेज करना चाहिए, देसी फूड की तरफ जाना चाहिए, चाहे जिस रीजन का हो। दाल बाटी हो, पाव भाजी हो, लिट्टी चोखा हो, जिस देश का जो फूड है उसको हमें अपनाना चाहिए, और जंक फूड की तरफ नहीं जाना चाहिए। वो चाहे पिज़्ज़ा हो, बर्गर हो। मैं किसी का पर्सनल शिकायत नहीं करना चाहूँगा, लेकिन जंक फूड से बचना चाहिए हम सबको। और ऐसा नहीं कि मैं बिहार का हूँ तो लिट्टी के प्रचार करने आया हूँ। लिट्टी है गुणवत्ता वाला चीज़, दाल बाटी खाइए, लिट्टी खाइए। और मैम मेरा शौक़ है कि मैं बिहार को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहा हूँ, और लिट्टी चोखा अपने आप में बहुत बड़ा एक प्रोडक्ट है, और इसको हम चाहेंगे कि भाई सब लोग खाएं।
आप पहले जो मुझसे बात कर रहे थे, आपने ये भी कहा था कि स्ट्रीट फूड अभी जैसे फ्यूल क्राइसिस चल रही है वो अडेप्ट कर पाता है। जैसे लिट्टी चोखा को तो ज़रूरत भी नहीं है शायद।
मैम लिट्टी चोखा इसलिए अधिक कहते हैं गुण वाले हैं कि लिट्टी चोखा बनाने के लिए ना किरोसिन तेल, ना LPG, न सीएनजी, किसी भी तरह का फ्यूल की ज़रूरत नहीं है। आप अगर जंगल में भी हैं, अगर आपके पास आपके बैग में आटा है, सत्तू है, तो आप लकड़ी का व्यवस्था करिए, कोयले पे आप बना करके लिट्टी खा सकते हैं। कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है फ्यूल की, कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है गैस की। अभी देश में चल रहा है गैसों के हालात, अभी हम सारे रेस्टोरेंट वाले जानते हैं कि क्या स्थिति से गुजर रहे हैं हम लोग। ब्लैक में भी एलपीजी नहीं मिल रहा है, बड़ी समस्या हो रही है देश के लिए। ये देश में गैस हो नहीं रहा है, बाहर से आना है। तो लिट्टी इसीलिए बहुत बड़ा प्रोडक्ट है हमारे बिहार के लिए। और लिट्टी में गुण इतना बड़ा है कि कंप्लीट फूड है मैम। आटा है, होल व्हीट है, दाल के बदले सत्तू रखा हुआ है, सब्जी के बदले चोखा रखा हुआ है, चटनी में चटनी है, पिकल्स में आपको सलाद भी दिया जा रहा है। तो एक कंप्लीट मील है। अगर आप लिट्टी चोखा खा करके डिनर भी कंप्लीट कर सकते हैं। हेल्दी फूड है। अगर कोई अस्वस्थ व्यक्ति है जिसको डॉक्टर ने कुछ कहा है कि भाई आप बाहर का चीज़ नहीं खाओ, लेकिन वो लिट्टी चोखा खा सकता है क्योंकि इतना हेल्दी है और हाइजीनिक है। हाइजीनिक इसलिए कि डायरेक्ट कोयले पे पकता है, इसमें कोई इन्फेक्शन की इसको कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। ऐसा नहीं है कि गलत हाथ से छू दिए तो इन्फेक्टेड हो जाएगा, क्योंकि कोयला है। ग्लव्स पहन करके बनाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, कोयले पे बनाना है। और मैं सेफ आदमी हूँ और देखा हूँ कि थोड़ा सा जो ट्रेडिशनल चीज़ है उसको पकड़ के रखने से ही हम लोग आगे बढ़ सकते हैं। ट्रेडिशनल बेस को छोड़ देंगे तो आगे बढ़ना बड़ा मुश्किल हो जाएगा।
बिल्कुल। Priyadarshini, if I were to come back to you, to your book, you've drawn connections between street food in Delhi, Amritsar, Varanasi, through the movement of migrants. And could you talk about any one dish and the kind of variations that you've seen across the country, and how that sort of highlights how the street food scape has been shaped by the movement of migrants across the country?
Sure. So I think the first thing that comes to mind is something like a puri kachori. Deep fried sir will not like it, but we have variants, and it tells stories of migration really. So say for instance Kolkata, you cannot imagine a Kolkata breakfast at home. It's luchi tarkari, but when it comes to say the quintessential sweet shop breakfasts of Calcutta, it is kachori sabzi or kochuri tarkari as we call it. And again, when we talk about Kolkata sweet shops, we talk about Bengali sweet shops, we talk about confectioners of Bengal, but a lot of North Indian confectioners also migrated to Bengal. They also have a huge contribution in sort of building that culture of sweet meat or sweet shop culture, as also the what we call the nonta, the savory items that are sold at sweet shops, which we also often eat for breakfast. Very interestingly, again there are variants of you have the bedmi, the bedai, and then you have the kachori. These are somewhat variants made with similar ingredients. Of course, there is difference in nuances. In Kolkata, something that I really it was a discovery for me. There is an entire colony in South Calcutta which I knew nothing about, where there are about 30-40 odd people from Bihar, predominantly from Bihar, who make dal puri. Now, dal puri is also something, growing up, I had no idea that this had come to, my part of the world from somewhere else. Dal puri is also, it's a Bengali, it's a favorite in Bengali homes. And dal puri is something that every family there makes along with the sabzis, and they sell it to vendors who collect it from that colony early in the morning, carry it in glass boxes across the city. If you've been to Calcutta in the mornings, you'll see these vendors standing on street corners and selling that dal puri and 2-3 different kinds of sabzis. All of that is made and sold wholesale in this little colony of Biharis. Again, dal puri, another interesting aspect that I'd like to share. So when you talk about Mughlai breakfast of Calcutta, we call it Mughlai just because, but it's basically the breakfast. It's meaty breakfast that's usually available in what you call the city's Musalman paras, or where there's a more dominant Muslim presence in neighborhoods, mostly in Muslim-owned eateries and street food stalls. So you get your nihari during the winters, and you have your dal gosh, the nishtu, and one amazing combination that is quintessentially Kolkata is mutton tikya and dal puri. and they have it in the morning. This is food that's consumed by people who will, who will go and perform hard labor. For them, burning these calories is not a big deal. So this is not, yes, this is a lot of greasy food, but the people who are consuming it daily, not just, once in a while, like maybe people like, many people in the room would probably, it'll be a treat for them, it's daily food, but they also burn it out. So somebody told me at one of the shops that dal puri tikya nahi hoga to Kalkatiya log kya khayega, and that is something that stuck to me. So when we talk about Mughlai breakfast of Kolkata, we talk about Wajid Ali Shah and how he was, how the royal entourage came to Calcutta and how that shaped the food, the Mughlai food. But Muslims have arrived in Calcutta in several waves, and the word Kalkatiya stuck to me. And when I looked into it, a lot of indentured laborers from UP and Bihar who went to various colonies through the Calcutta port, and many of them also stayed back, worked in the port, stayed in the city, are called Kalkatiya. So this breakfast duo sort of opened a new aspect of migration to the city, to Calcutta, of migrant communities that came and built that city. So that was very interesting to me.
Absolutely. Before I round up the conversation with a question to Mr. Chuhaupe, I wanted to ask both of you, ये innovation का ज़माना है, online delivery का ज़माना है, AI का ज़माना है. आप डेफिनेटली आप बोल रहे हैं कि ट्रेडिशनल टेस्ट जो ट्रेडिशन है हमारा उसको पकड़ के रखना भी चाहिए, लेकिन स्ट्रीट फूड या पब्लिक फूड जो स्पेसेस हैं उनमें आप किस तरीके से आप सोचते हैं कि इनोवेशन हो सकता है, या आप वे फॉरवर्ड क्या सोचते हैं उसमें? एंड आई पोस्ट दिस टू बोथ ऑफ यू.
मैम, कलकत्ता की बात इन्होंने की है, पूरी सब्जी, पूरी कचौरी, ये लोग इन्वेंशन कर रहे हैं. पहले लुची पूरी था, अब कचौरी में भी कन्वर्ट हो रहे हैं. कचौरी सब्जी खूब खा रहे हैं लोग. हम लोगों ने भी बिहार में पिट्ठा होता है, हमारे मेनू में लिट्टी के अलावा पिट्ठा है, दाल पूड़ी भी है. दाल पूड़ी की बात इन्होंने कहा, दाल पूड़ी है, दाल पूड़ी मेनू में रखा हुआ है. दाल पूड़ी को भी हम लोग बेच रहे हैं और लोग खा रहे हैं. लिट्टी चोखा एक बहुत बड़ा प्रचार हो गया है और खाते हैं दाल बाटी, लिट्टी चोखा. उसके पैरेलल हम लोग क्या देख रहे हैं कि मोमो जो मार्केट में चल रहा है, और पीठा जो होता है जब स्टीम किया हुआ था, जिसमें मोमोज स्टीम करते हैं, उसी में हम लोग पीठा को स्टीम कर रहे हैं. दाल स्टफ़ करके उसको होल व्हीट में राइस फ्लोर होता है, उसमें स्टफ़ करके उसको स्टीम करके हम लोग दे रहे हैं और लोग खा भी रहे हैं उसको. तो पीठा है, दाल पूड़ी है, हमारे मेनू में रखा हुआ है. आम झोर है, लीची का जूस है, सत्तू पराठा है. सत्तू पराठा भी बनाते हैं, सत्तू पराठा भी खाते हैं लोग. सत्तू पराठा नॉनवेज के साथ भी बहुत लगाते हैं, सत्तू पराठा के साथ चिकन लोग खा रहे हैं. तो हम लोग इन्वेंशन कर रहे हैं और मेनू को बड़ा कर रहे हैं और आगे हम लोग बढ़ रहे हैं. स्ट्रीट फूड का एक थोड़ा सा प्रॉब्लम क्या है ना, कि सबसे बड़ा, इनफैक्ट मैं सच बोल रहा हूँ, शायद सब लोग सहमत हो चाहे नहीं हो, एक तो वो स्ट्रीट फूड रोड साइड होता है, वहाँ एमसीडी का, दिल्ली पुलिस का, आम पब्लिक का बहुत बड़ा इशू होता है. हम भुक्तभोगी हैं. सरकार कहती है यहाँ मत लगाओ, पब्लिक कहती है सुविधा चाहिए. आप देखिए कि ज़रूरत हो गई है कि सुबह सुबह ऑफिस गोइंग सारे लोग हैं दिल्ली शहर में. हर शहर में सुबह पर ब्रेकफास्ट बनाने के लिए बड़ी समस्या होती है. ऑफिस गोइंग है, मियाँ बीवी घर से बाहर निकलना है, बाहर जाके ऑफिस से कहीं ब्रेकफास्ट करना है, और बाहर मिल रहा है, लेकिन वो कॉस्ट इफेक्ट बहुत हो जाता है, महंगा होता है, अनहाइजीनिक होता है. हाइजीन के चलते लोग बहुत सारे स्ट्रीट फूड को नहीं खा पाते हैं. बहुत सारे अपर मिडिल क्लास फैमिली है, अपर क्लास फैमिली है, स्ट्रीट फूड पसंद नहीं करती है, क्योंकि मैं रोड साइड में खाना कैसे खाऊं, रोड पे खाना खड़ा होगा कैसे खाऊं. लेकिन उसको वेंडरिंग जोन बना दिया जाए, इसको थोड़ा सा सपोर्ट किया जाए, तो स्ट्रीट फूड खाने में कोई बुराई नहीं है. हाइजीनिक है, बने हाइजीनिक और मिले तो खाने में कोई बुराई नहीं है, लोग खाते भी हैं इसको. और हमको लगता है कि धीरे धीरे ये जो रीजनल फूड है उसके तरफ लोग आगे बढ़ रहे हैं और उसमें इन्वेंशन कर रहे हैं. समय के अनुसार शॉर्ट में कैसे बने और उसको बना कर कैसे कस्टमर तक पहुंचाए, इसकी व्यवस्था लोग वेंडरिंग कर रहे हैं. मोमोज अभी थोड़ा धीरे से कम हुआ है, पहले से लोग मोमोज कम खा रहे हैं.
Priyadarshini, if you were to take this question, especially because you've written about third generation, fourth generations of families that started as street food vendors, and now how they are sort of building on it.
Yes. So one of the things, of course, they're bringing in technology where they can. But another thing that I see is there's this need for innovating on tastes and textures, and sometimes things go wild, and we know how wild it is getting on the streets. And of course, we can scoff at it and we can say that this is going too far. But what intrigues me about it is how from the entrepreneurial spirit side, where they're so keen on innovating, they are basically also playing to what the world around them is doing, and the way, like, it's become a neophiliac world, right? We always looking for something new. We always want something wacky or Instagrammable, or just something that is going to shock us, maybe, if not surprise us. And these guys are constantly trying to up their game and play that. And of course, we can be purists, but there are takers for food like that. That food is happening, and I see this sort of irreverence, which is refreshing to me. Without the freight of tradition and that purist thing, which is, from one way, it is something new. But I draw the line at, say, a chocolate omelette, which I mean, yes, it's got like nicely, it's got chilies, it's got onions, all of that, and then some chocolate sauce on top. I mean, it is beyond. I mean, that's where I draw the line. But I'm all for innovation. Let's see what works, what doesn't. Also, I think it also comes from a point of access. It depends on your level of access, where you come from, and what is like good food to you. For someone else, something else might be their aspiration. I mean, who are we to decide that?
I wanted to pose one question to Mr. Chu Haupe, if he's there.
Yes, yes. Sorry. The question is,
yeah.
so can you repeat the question?
Yeah, no, I'm just posing it. You've talked about, your entire practice is sort of a bridge between history and the present moment that we are in. And you've taken a dish also, or you're looking at visual cultures and food cultures which have been shaped by maritime history. So if you take the nasi goreng, for instance, it has Chinese techniques, Malay ingredients, and so many colonial interventions as well. And now you add that, the personal flair of the street food vendor as well, who has secret sauces and his or her own style of cooking a particular thing. How do you see the personal and the political sort of play out on the street as in the course of your research?
Yeah, so I guess that is I would say that is where I find the my project in, and we're looking at the whole nasi goreng is kind of interesting because it brings together a kind of divergence of all these how would I say different cultures together and making them kind of come together on the street. But I guess more importantly is really how by offering the different dishes to the different, I would say, different uh, like people eating, trying the different food, it definitely does inform the people about the larger kind of political history as well. And why I wanted to say that is actually I just want to very quickly run through again a few visuals that I prepared. It's also because I'm using Indonesia as a context. Is that so? This is a source from the Southeast Asian News where it actually says like Indonesia has 104 types of fried rice. Makes it very diverse, and so these are some of the examples. You can see different regions of Indonesia have different type of nasi goreng itself, and so this itself is also becomes a kind of showing that political history as well. Perhaps I would say more of a cultural, gastronomical history in that sense. But perhaps also very quickly moving on as well. Again, as you can see, like I said, there are 104 different types. But what is the more interesting part about the idea of the broader political history and the personal to the food is something that I've also been looking at a lot lately, is looking at how other nations have decided to imagine a type of nasi goreng recipes of another place. So in this case, there is nasi goreng Hong Kong. This is again found in Indonesia itself. But also very quickly, I want to go into Singapore fried rice. As a Singaporean, I have never heard of Singapore fried rice until I left Singapore. And then, Yeah, so Singapore fried rice does not exist in Singapore, but here I mean, so you can see these are some of my images that I took from the top two are from the UK, London. You can see the ones I highlighted, Singapore fried rice, and it's always a chili. Also because I guess the British are not very good with eating spicy food, so the idea of Singapore fried rice is something spicy. So again, you have this kind of association as well. And then also, of course, the bottom two was so some months ago, I was actually in Dubai. And what is interesting is that I actually chanced upon a Singapore fried rice on the menu of interestingly, a restaurant is I would say a working class Indian restaurant in an industrial area. It's not even in any of the fancy malls. And there I have Singapore fried rice and I tried it itself. So I think and again, like I say, as a Singaporean, I have no idea what Singapore fried rice until I went overseas, and so this whole idea of, this personal and broader political history kind of intersect in my hunts for this Singapore fried rice whenever I go overseas, and of course I do have more to share, but I'm also aware of time, which I do not want to go too deep into it. But basically, this Singapore fried rice is a kind of imagination of foreigners about Singapore, food, and maybe Singapore as a nation itself. So this is where I find the idea of this kind of, yeah, it's a very common type of street food, you can say, maybe, of nasi goreng, fried rice, kind of clash in this kind of politics, and also a very personal notion as well, because I think everyone has a kind of idea of what, maybe, I don't know, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, maybe everyone here in the audience probably have an idea of how Singapore fried rice tastes like, but I do not, but then, and yet this is also that interesting intersection points that I'm actually very curious about. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And we're sort of running short on time, so we'll just open the floor to questions, if any.
Yeah, when you talked about the invisibility of women in the production of food or consumption of street food, I was curious to know about the role of caste actually when we talk about street food, because it's about, food is not just food, it's culture. People from we talk about region when we discuss about street food, how different from different region the food travels. But because like in Indian history, for past 100, 200 years, food means purity, like certain caste eat separately, and several social reformation movement emphasize on interdining aspect actually. Yes. So then for past 100 years, interdining has been part of every social reformation movement. So then when it comes to street food, is caste invisible or non-existent actually? Because we don't visibly see caste, but what about the stories of people from marginalized caste? Can they easily set up a street food stall in major places of Delhi? Can they rise up, their business be successful? What are their challenges? We don't talk about it much. So, but is cost invisible or non-existent in street food aspect?
So from my research and from what I've realized, the whole idea of public eating has an extremely casteist history, right? So especially a lot of, in fact, when it comes to breakfast establishments, I have encountered this so many times. But it also so happens that it is the public eating spaces which sort of also challenged those notions, those casteist stipulations and of that circumscribed food and commensality. They were reflectors of all of that. And then again, they were the ones that also challenged those notions. So that is something that I have seen when I've been, studying breakfast institutions, especially on the streets, public establishments. For instance, the Udupi restaurants of down south that sort of popularized the notion of South Indian breakfasts being rice-based, pure vegetarian idli dosa meal, and have completely not focused on, say, food that is served at military hotels, or even, say, a ragi ganji that is sort of sold on the streets of Bangalore and which is so important to the working classes, often the marginalized classes, and by extension mention marginalized castes. So, in the popular and dominant narratives, there is a clear, it is still existent. So that's what I want to tell you. If not, I might not be able to give you in terms of data, because that has not been my area of inquiry. But in a more socio-cultural sense, in that way I have seen, because if you go outside anywhere, and I'm just taking an example from Bangalore, you ask people, oh, but what is the breakfast down south? Everyone univocally will talk about idli dosa, and we know the history of how these foods were popularized by Brahmins from the Udupi region, who had a monopoly really on that kind of food, on cooking with rice. Rice again was an elite grain. It was not available to everyone in a way we think rice growing cultures everyone eat rice in equal quantities. That's not what history tells us. But other, like millet based food, which is suddenly a fad now, that has been food for the marginalized classes and caste forever. But those are not what is sort of, spotlighted in narratives about foodways and food cultures and what is traditional and what is not. I don't know if I've been able to answer your question. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, hi. While traveling across the country, I've strongly realized that in the morning during breakfast, so we work with farmers, and if you go to a village, they'll go and have their vada pav, their chai, at different places. Yes, they have the breakfast options at home, but at some point they are all at the vada pav shop. I'm curious to understand that where did this even come from, because at the end, it's fried food. So yes, it's become street food. Yes, it's part of our culture. But bread, that pav which came about is, of course, it's part of the Green Revolution. It's hybrid bread. It's hybrid wheat. It's made from maida. So do you think it's actually part of our breakfast culture, which has become very, very popular now because it's part of that system? There was an agri-value chain which was put in place, exactly what we were talking about, with the cook stoves and things. There was a system put in place, an end-to-end business model. Therefore, basmati works, therefore wheat works. And therefore, pav came about because there was a business model set up for it. So have you, discovered a lot of these patterns across the country?
Yes, so like I said, my inquiry, of course, has taken a certain, there are certain routes that I took. Again, somewhere your question will merge with this. When we say tradition, and especially tradition it is not constant. That is the thing we have to understand about tradition. It's constantly evolving, and what is tradition now wasn't, and what is not tradition now will be in all probability. When you talk about vada pav, of course, vada pav is something that the story goes was invented sometime in the 1960s. But it is integral to the food culture in Mumbai. Whereas, in the region, I've been told, especially in rural agrarian, parts of even Maharashtra and the Konkan, the food usually that people would eat in the morning would be either basi bhakri, leftover bhakri, or maybe freshly made, along with some leftover curries. And that has been the morning meal for most of the working proletariat across the country, because who is going to prepare fresh, large breakfasts early in the morning when you have work to think about? You come back to a larger meal later. But again, in Bombay, the vada pav, when you're talking about vada pav, there are places still in Bombay, Maharashtrian Brahmin joints that refuse to serve pav because it is something that is not traditionally theirs. Of course, they don't say that, but there is a casteist history to it, because something like pav would not be consumed by the upper castes simply because they were touched by hand by people who were non-upper caste, non-Hindus. These were baked by Muslims, the Parsis, often traditionally, again, often Hindus of so-called lower castes. And so there was bread. And then why did bread become popular? Because of mechanization. Again, we were talking about convenience in a previous panel, right? So it's all about convenience. Once it became convenient, then people become more open to it. Then, you don't make 5 extra chapatis. You can just buy your pav or your bread and have it. And of course, mechanization, and we see from like advertisements from the colonial era that when food, like bread was mechanized and industrially produced, that they say untouched by hand. Untouched by hand was something that came up again and again. And why do you think that is? And that sort of ties it to your question. That untouched by hand was to reassure the caste elite that you will not lose your caste if you ate it. So again, tradition, of course, like you said, industrialization, what you spoke about is also true. But sometimes the roots go deeper. There are other arguments and other rationale behind it also.
Hi, we have time for one last.
Yeah, hi. This is actually a question to Mr. Haupe, if he is still there. Is he there?
Yes.
Hi.
Yes, yeah.
So
Hi.
I wanted to ask you about the Singapore fried rice that you were checking out. Simply because in Kolkata, the Chinese of Kolkata who migrated to India in the end 70s and then started coming in and setting up in their little communities, the Cantons first kind of started making Chinese food more of a thing for Kolkata and served it to people outside of their own communities, which was rare. But as we started liking Indian Chinese food and things that were available to us, we ended up making a lot of things. And most of it, I don't think anybody will recognize outside of India. And we are sorry about that. But what I would like to talk about is the Singapore fried rice that you found. And I wanted to ask you a very simple question. Does it by any chance have curry powder in it? And there is a reason why I'm asking. Does it by chance have any curry powder in it? Specifically, the Madras curry powder that was tinned and taken all over Southeast Asia. There is a reason for this. See, Singapore fried rice, Singapore noodles, Singapore rice noodle, everything that you will find in Kolkata, which we consider to be quote-unquote the birthplace of Indian Chinese, it contains one common ingredient, which is curry powder. Specifically, the Madras curry powder, which was popularized by the British. And because Singapore was such a huge British hub at one point of time, lots of people would go there to trade, lots of people would go there to make money. So I feel that you might want to look up the curry powder route a little and think if it is also there in Southeast Asia, because that would make the journey from this version to that version even that more interesting.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, my audio is a little bit bad. So is this a kind of a remark you're sharing, or is it a question that
more
you
of a remark, and I think it might help you into connecting with the West more than the East, because you've been working with Indonesia and different parts of Southeast Asia. I would definitely want you to come and explore at least the Chinese food scene of India is in Kolkata and other places, because it is so cool how industrious and wonderful these people were, who had little to nothing in their name and very few ingredients to work with, and they made it work. They grew their own stuff, they did their own thing, and they made a whole new version of Chinese food, which is so cool. So that's what my feedback is to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We've completely run out of time. Just want to thank the wonderful panel here for their lovely insights. I hope it was an informative discussion for you all. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Avantika.
Thank you.
Thank you, Devendraji. Thank you, Priyadarshini, for a very flavorful discussion. And I would now request Mr. Om Rotre to give you a small token of our appreciation.